Hello Scouts and welcome to Scouting at Home. For today's activity we're going to be tackling one of those more traditional but very popular activities, whittling. This is where we're going to need your nice sharp pocket knife, so if you haven't already done so, watch the video that we released previously on how to sharpen and take care of your pocket knife. You'll also need a stick found from the yard, local park, or some timber maybe from a workshop or the hardware store. Just an offcut will do just fine. We'll cover the do's and don'ts and making sure that you keep yourself safe in the process. The attached activity sheet also has a list of hints and tricks, so make sure you check that out too. Good luck and good scouting. For this activity we're going to need some timber and our pocket knife. Now I've chosen some balsa wood because it's a nice easy timber to cut, particularly when you're learning for the first time. The first thing that I've actually done is, once I've selected my timber, is I've traced out an outline of what it is that I want to carve, so I know which areas of negative space I'll be removing from my carving before I get too caught up in the detail. Now, just to introduce you to the basic strokes that we use when we're whittling timber, there's the push stroke, which is simply a matter of digging in the blade and pulling it away from you. This is very soft timber, so I can take away a lot. There's also the assisted push stroke, which is where you will then lever the blade away from you with your thumb in there to help maneuver it a bit further. There's the V style stroke, which is where we come in from either direction and create a notch. Now if you're going to be cutting somewhere particularly difficult, you may actually need to turn the whole block away so that you don't risk slipping and cutting your hand. Of course, safety when it comes to whittling is very important, and we do make sure that we don't whittle towards our hand where possible. Particularly when the blade is going to be working close to us, we need to be extremely careful. And we also want to make sure that we don't push too hard, because if we're pushing really hard into a piece of timber, there's every chance that the blade will eventually pop out, and when it does so, you won't have so much control over it. So it's very important that if you're finding it very difficult to get through the timber, to take the blade away and just try and take a little bit less off the next time around. So you can see there lots of little bits coming off at a time is still going to get the work done, so don't be too anxious to try and do it all in one single cut. Alright, now the next stroke I'm going to mention as well, in addition to that V style cut, is where we do a stopped cut, which is where we cut directly into the material, and then when we cut towards that stop line, it's going to hit that cut we've already made and stop it completely in its tracks. It's a bit similar to our V-style cut, but obviously it means that if, for example, the detail I had was a very square edge, such as the end of a limb or a body part that we're cutting into, we might want to remove the area below it, but leave a block of material there for which us to cut detail later. So we would cut into the side of the block and then cut down towards that. So it's very straightforward. Now the last stroke that I'm going to show you is one more advanced stroke, but it's something that's good to know so that as you get better, you'll be able to start to utilize this stroke as well. But I do recommend that you hold off until you've got a bit more experience and you know how your knife and the timber behave together, and make sure that you're feeling comfortable and confident. And preferably when you're learning, it's a good idea also to wear leather gloves, as that will help to deflect the blade if you do slip. I've got a fair bit of experience, so I don't tend to wear them myself, but it's definitely a good idea when you're starting out to use some leather rigger's gloves or heavy gloves of some description to help you protect yourself against your blade. And it's also a good idea to always make sure that you've got a nice sharp blade. A dull blade is going to mean you push harder and work harder, and you're more likely to make a mistake and hurt yourself. So make sure you've got a nice sharp blade before you start, and if you haven't covered sharpening blades previously, you can go back and have a look at our scouting at home activity, how to sharpen your pocket knife, and that'll show you exactly what to do so that you can do it at home. I'm going to continue on with the demonstration here. As I work around the back here, I'll show you that last stroke. We call this a pairing stroke. So that's actually where you pull towards you. It's a little bit like when you're peeling a potato or a piece of fruit. You're actually controlling the blade very carefully and you're pulling towards your thumb. Now, you may not be able to see it from that angle, but I'm not actually pulling into my thumb, I'm pulling parallel to my thumb. So if I were to slip, it would go straight past my thumb, but because my hand can only move so far, it's actually quite hard to actually slip it into my thumb unless I'm really careless and put my thumb in front of the blade. So make sure that your thumb's off to the side before you start pulling the blade towards you, and that's the paring stroke. Now, another thing we haven't mentioned is the grain of the timber. As you look at the timber itself, you can see there's all these little stripes that run through the timber. That's the grain of the timber, that's the natural growth lines. And our goal is to be cutting across those as we carve so that we can slice across several layers at a time. If we're going the wrong direction with the grain, so I've turned this around, it's much harder, and you can see how the grain is already starting to splinter because I'm not cutting with the grain. So you'll very easily find out which way the grain is going, and the more experience you get, the more you'll be able to see more clearly whether or not you're working with the grain, when it's very easy to cut, or working against the grain where it starts to really split and break apart. So I'll keep carving, and I think I've given enough instructions for the time being, so we might just speed me up from now and you can just watch me carving my little balsa wood duck. Now that we've blocked out the basic shape of my duck, we'll continue on with adding some more detail and rounding out his profile so it actually looks more like a three-dimensional duck rather than just a flat picture. One of the things you may have noticed in the sped up footage is that I did actually use the saw on my pocket knife to help cut out some of these negative spaces, because paring away with the knife into those curves is often quite difficult, as is taking off big chunks. So if you've got one available, there's no reason not to use it. It's certainly not cheating to use the tools at your disposal, and if there is a tool that's better for what you're trying to achieve, it's only going to make things faster and safer for you. So I'm going to carry on with shaping this. I'll keep speeding up the footage and hopefully keep this interesting for you. And there we have it. That's my little duck carving. Obviously not the best duck in the world, but it's a good little practice exercise to try something different. So give it a go. As I said, starting with balsa wood's a good option if you've never carved before, but there's lots of other good timbers for carving. Nice fresh pine is great, as is lots of other soft woods. So have a chat to your local timber wholesalers and see if they maybe have some offcuts. You can try different timbers. And of course there are local timber working, carving and wood turning groups all over Australia, and I'm sure around the world, that you'd be able to visit if you wanted to find out more information about local suppliers and also local timbers. So good luck and enjoy some basic whittling.